we have on the planet. There's 200 of them scattered throughout Montana, and that was about the size of the state of West Virginia. And they would be miles apart. When Kennedy referred to his ace in the hole in the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was talking about one of these sites, Alpha 1, which was closest to the base. Sometimes we would drive 3.5 hours to get there. It was long days. We were given special codes, and we had communication devices to be able to open up the missile site so that they could work on them. They were old technology. They were from the 60s, so a lot of things break, a lot of things need to be maintained. So, sometimes there were a bunch of us young guys, we're in our early 20s, and we would go out, there'd be 4 of us, go out and gain access to a nuclear missile and work on it. During the START treaty inspections, the Russian counterparts would come and inspect our facilities. Well, every one of them were equivalent rank to a colonel or a captain. They wouldn't even let their enlisted folks touch nuclear missiles. And the interpreter was talking to us and said, how old are you guys? What rank are you? And as we told them, they just couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that they would allow young, inexperienced individuals to be able to have full access to these. And I thought that it really speaks to our nation's military, that we're considered professionals from the time we leave training till whenever you depart. The expectation is that you're not the guy holding the bucket as somebody else pumps the water out of it, as he said. I thought that was great. It really was an eye-opener for the rest of us. It's just kind of our daily life. And you see the results of what a Russian military that has such a stovepipe hierarchy does when they're in battle. If you don't trust your people, if you don't train them appropriately, you don't make it for them. So we were there for 4 years. I was in tax briefings to get out. I was, I'd done my 4 years. We were getting ready to leave, right around 4 years, and I was in the shower that morning. I think, September 11th. For everybody that lived prior to my time, when Kennedy was shot, my parents always said I remembered exactly what I was doing when I heard about it. Everybody that has lived through the era of September 11th remembers exactly what they were doing and where they were. And my wife worked at a bank. She was working as an advertising executive for a news agency at the time. And she yelled at me and she said, "Hey, get out here! A plane just hit the World Trade Center." I said, "Oh my goodness! I can't believe somebody flew a plane into the World Trade Center. I thought it was going to be like a Cessna or something." And I went out, and we're sitting there watching the news. Wow, this is awful. So I got dressed, went to work, and as we're sitting in our briefings, they pulled the TV out because we were waiting for it to start, and I saw the other World Trade Center get hit. And I said, "This isn't an accident. This is on purpose." And things changed drastically for me at that point in my life. In a critically manned career field, being a gun toter, we were put on what's called stop loss. And I had been going to college. I had embraced the idea of college after standing out on these sites in 20 below zero and walking around every 30 minutes. Sometimes it was a lot of fun and exciting, but most of the time it was like watching grass grow. So, on stop loss, I couldn't go to school. I was kind of stuck. I was just doing my job. We even had to shut down all of the missile field for a time. And all I was doing was flying around armed on helicopters. We would fly all around the missile field and respond to alarms and reset. And my commander came to me and she said, "Brady, what do we got to do to get you to re-enlist? You've had a pretty good career. I had a lot of luck. I received a bunch of awards and things there, and it was a good point. It was good up to that point in my career." And she said, "What do we got to do?" And I said, "I'd like to get closer to home. I'm from Pennsylvania. Occasionally, I'd like to be able to go home for a holiday. if you could get me orders closer to home, I'll re-enlist. In 2 weeks, she had me orders to Andrews Air Force Base, which is on just the south corner of the Beltway in Washington, D.C., and that's where Air Force One is stationed. So I showed up there my first night on duty. I was standing at the gate and waving cars in, and I hear automatic gunfire downtown. I'm thinking, this is, I've been standing in the missile field and I've never heard anybody shooting guns. So I realized that I did not want to stand at the front gate for the rest of the next 4 years. I found out about the flying program. It was very small. There's about 50 in the Air Force that are called ASNCOs, Aircraft Non-Security Non-Commissioned Officers. And you have to go through a specialized school. It's what I get this badge for here, is Raven School in Fort Dix, New Jersey. And it's kind of like federal air marshal training, but with a little bit more beating. So I qualified for that, went through that training, came back and started flying special air missions on all of the blue and whites. I'd fly on Air Force One some, but I'd fly with the First Lady, Secretary of Defense at the time, Donald Rumsfeld, and this picture with George Bush Sr. was actually on tsunami relief. I took he and President Clinton to the areas in Malaysia that had been ravaged by a tsunami, and so he was, in his aging years, he had been napping at the time, and he came out. He wanted to take pictures with all of us because he was just a really great guy, World War II vet himself, a hero in my mind. And he said, "I look like a dirty old man who's been sleeping." I said, "I just appreciate that you're willing to take a picture with me, sir." So we chatted for a little bit. I got a chance to sit and talk with Bill Clinton. Regardless of your political ideas or beliefs, it was an engaging conversation. And he warned me at the time. He said, "Mark my words, Vladimir Putin is the next best thing to Joseph Stalin. Keep an eye on that guy. If he has something to do with your military career going bad, it wouldn't surprise me." So we were there for 4 years. I got to experience a lot of really unique situations. Sometimes I'd fly on our small jets. One of them was unmarked. We took an individual from a three-letter agency who was pretending to be from the State Department into Khartoum, Sudan. It was the first time we had been there in 10 years. If anybody offers for you to go to Khartoum, Sudan, politely turn them down. Unless you're Doctors Without Borders or something like that, then please go. They need your help. But it was kind of a rough place. So we landed, and one of us would take a shift at the aircraft each time. And sometimes, if there was 2 of us, you were on 12 hours. This one, we had 3 of us, so we would rotate. It was pretty interesting. Most times we go places, they had a car for us. It was, we stayed in nice hotels. It was pretty good. I'm not going to lie to you. It was a good time. This was not one of those. As we went back, we met at the embassy with the only other service members in the country, the Marines at the embassy there, and they gave me a radio and said, "We're an hour from the flight line. If it goes south, we'll come, but you're on your own." I said, "Okay, thanks, I appreciate it." So I was second shift out. First individual there was our lead, and he stayed with the aircraft as we went back to the hotel, and then some drivers came and picked me up. They were local nationals, and they picked me up to take me back to the airfield, and it was the middle of the night. And I always try to get a kind of a good idea. At the time, we didn't have Google Maps on our phone, so I couldn't pin where I had parked. So I tried to get a good idea where the airfield was, and because we were on our own. We didn't have a status of forces agreement. We left all of our guns at the plane. The only thing I had on me was an expendable baton. So these individuals were taking me back to the flight line, and they started driving down a bunch of back streets and making turns that I didn't expect. And they were talking to each other in a language that the command sergeant major might recognize, but I did not. And I was starting to feel like I was in imminent danger. So I leaned up between the seats and I said, "You have 3 minutes, and I know you both understand me, to get me to the flight line or get me back to the embassy." And they said a few things to each other and turned and went to the flight line. When we got there, I warned my partner. I said, "Don't let them make any turns. There's only one that they need to make to get back to the embassy, and it's a left." So he said, "Okay." Nothing happened, but I'm not really sure where it was going that night. But there was a lot of situations like that where they had taught us in Raven School that our biggest and most powerful weapon was our mouth. You could talk yourself into or out of a lot of situations, and you didn't have a lot of people around you to depend on. So that was something I learned that was very valuable for my time there. When I joined the Air Force, somebody told me, and it was wise counsel, don't join for all the fringe benefits. I know a lot of people say, "I joined to go to school," or "I joined because I needed health care," or whatever. They said, if you want to make anything of it, join because you want to serve your country. It's the most important thing that you can do at that point in your life. Join for the right reasons. And I did. I had a lot of really great examples of military members in my family. Grandfather that was in World War II. A couple of uncles that were in the Korean War. Grew up, on Halloween, putting on some of their old stuff, and I feel like I'm on Halloween right now because I haven't put this on in 16 years. Ms. Lemon is either the greatest con artist or should be a hostage negotiator, because she talked me into, she said, "So many other guys are going to be wearing their stuff, and it's really, it shows your pride in your service." So I did. So if I look ridiculous, I apologize. I'm not quite as light as I was. Life happens. I have 2 boys. One was born at Andrews Air Force Base when we were stationed there, and another who's a 7th grader in Grove City. My oldest is he's in Mexico now. He graduated high school from Grove City High School this last year, and he's serving a mission for our church for 2 years in Mexico. And his apartment looks like a Turkish prison, so he left a pretty comfortable circumstance to go to something pretty uncomfortable to help others. No matter whether you decide to wear the uniform or go and do something else, I would implore that you seek to do things in your life that help to better others. You'll gain the most out of yours when you look out instead of in. But when I was at his graduation, I was looking down through the graduation roster, and I saw a lot of kids going to college, which was great. I saw a lot of kids that didn't have a plan, undecided next to their name. I would have been one of those undecideds. And then I saw one solitary soul out of his graduating class that had decided to join the U.S. Air Force. I'm not saying that the military is for everybody. Clearly it is not. But if you think that you have what it takes inside of you to be able to join and serve this country in one of the branches of the service, you won't regret it. Depending on what you do, there could be danger or peril involved, or you could be working in a medical facility, which is no more dangerous than going to college these days. There's a lot of opportunities and options. You choose your path, and you go in eyes wide open. There is no Napoleon who gets you drunk in a restaurant, takes you out the back door and puts you on a ship, and now you're a soldier. We have a lot of opportunities available to us, and I'm grateful that we have the armed services and for everybody that has served. And, that history of service in my family and in my wife's family, it has always resonated with me. Her 2 grandfathers on her side, both of them were in D-Day, one into Omaha and one jumped into Holland as a paratrooper. The one on Omaha Beach was there with his father and his brother, which to me that seemed like a total mix-up. They should have all three been there, but the dad was a sergeant major, the two sons, both in the Big Red One. They all served and lived through the circumstance and situation, and their grandfather had lost an arm and a lung in World War I. I've got a lot of family history. I grew up in Slippery Rock, and I trace it all the way back to the Civil War, and recognize that there's a lot of valiant service. If we don't have people that stand up and say, I will go and do, if not you, then who? It's no small thing. That's why we're all gathered here today, is to recognize the service of veterans. Don't confuse Veterans Day with Memorial Day. That happens a lot. We honor those who served, and on Memorial Day, with great reverence, we honor those who served and gave everything that they had to offer. So, since matriculated out of the Air Force in 2006, and I started working for the federal government. I do background investigations for the Department of Defense. So I still work for DOD, but I don't wear this every day. It's interesting work. I'm sure that some of you know somebody that works in the mines and lawyers. It's not quite as exciting as flying around on Air Force One, but I've appreciated the opportunity to continue to serve my country in some capacity, and ensuring that only individuals of the highest caliber are able to get into military and government service. We do about 2 million background investigations a year. I see a lot of individuals that close doors at your age, where they're not able to go into the military or serve in the federal government, or even beyond. They do things where they're imprisoned and they lose a lot of their rights. Make your decisions now that when tempted or put in a situation where you can choose one path or the other, always choose the one that you know that is legal and upstanding. You'll never regret it. As you get old, you may have missed out on some crazy times, but you'll never regret not having the opportunities. I'm thankful that I made enough choices in my life to be able to hold a top secret clearance, to be able to do the things that I have. A couple of things done differently, and it would have just not been available to me. You don't realize that when you're young, and it's easy when you're old with gray hair with a bald spot on top to look back and say, well, you really got to watch what you're doing between 15 and 25. A decade of decision is super important. Everything that you decide between now and 25 will chart the course for the rest of your life. I'm not trying to put too much pressure on you, but it's a big deal. So think about that when you're out having fun with your friends, or you decide that you want to drive a little faster than you should, or somebody puts something in front of you, some type of substance to try, or talks about going to do that. Don't do it. It's not worth it. You'll close doors before you even get to them. Walk the other way, call somebody that cares. But you'll have far more opportunities available to you, whether it's in uniformed service or in civilian life. But it's been an interesting ride, and I wouldn't take $1 million to give back my time in the Air Force, and it really has charted the course for the rest of my life, and it's been a pleasure to continue to be able to serve the DOD, and I got to use my military time towards retirement. So when I'm 57, I'll be able to walk away with a federal retirement and maybe go do some of the things that I like to do with my hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff Sergeant Craddy. Our final veteran is Command Sergeant Major Barry Donahue. He was born and raised in Barnville, South Carolina, and made the decision to join the Army after he realized his current job was not fulfilling enough. He also wanted to travel and see other parts of the world. So at 21 years old, after considering both the Marine Corps and Army, he chose to enlist in the Army in May of 1992, where he served a total of 29 years. He completed his basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and spent most of his time as an Arabic and Farsi linguist. He fulfilled his dreams of traveling the world by serving 2 combat tours in Iraq, 2 tours in Kosovo, and completed other deployments in foreign countries. He retired as the Command Sergeant Major for the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. He now serves as the commander of our local VFW right across the street and has 4 children currently enrolled in Knoch School District. With that, I'll let him tell you more about his experiences in the Army.
Hey, thanks, Ms. Lemon. How much time do I have?
About 20-25 minutes.
Okay. I learned to start writing speeches because I go on tangents, and I talk for like an hour. So I did write a speech, but I'm not going to read it. It's only 8 minutes. Thank you, Ms. Lemon, for doing this. This is very important. Thank you to the staff and faculty leadership of Knoch for having us here today. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to reiterate what Mr. James said, reference Memorial Day, Veterans Day. Don't wish a veteran happy Memorial Day. It is for those who passed away in combat. So wish us a happy Veterans Day, okay? And I know the intent is good. I've had relatives wish me that, and I had to help them understand that that's not what we do. And then the second tidbit for veterans, never ask, you know they say there's no dumb questions. Well, there is one. Don't ask a veteran if they've ever killed somebody. That's not something that veterans like to talk about. So there you go. I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I grew up, as you said, in Barnville, South Carolina. If you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, has anybody seen Forrest Gump? Okay, yeah. But the little town he walks through as a little boy, there's a barbershop scene there. That's Barnville, and I grew up on that road about 3 miles out in the country. Barnville, Hampton County is pretty depressed. Hampton's in the news these days with a certain lawyer who I went to high school with. But it's a pretty depressed town economically, and but it's a good town, and I'm really proud that I grew up there. I learned a lot of values. When I joined the military, I picked watermelons in the summer, I played football, I played basketball. Joined the military, and with the values I was raised with, it wasn't that difficult to become a soldier and live the military values and to do the work. I felt like my football camp was tougher than basic training, to be honest with you. I was trimming trees around power lines in Hampton, South Carolina, and Ridgeland, Beaufort area. And I lived out in the sticks with my sister and her friend in a trailer, and it's just a dead-end job. And I remember one Sunday night, my sister goes, "Why don't you go join the Air Force or something?" And I said, "You know what, I think I'll go do that." And so I didn't wear my uniform, but I do wear green today for the Army, and I like green. So the Navy and the Air Force were out of the question for me, and it was Marines or Army. So go down to Beaufort, South Carolina, talk to a recruiter, and talk to a Marine recruiter as well. I talked to Army guy. He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to go to California." He said, "What do you want to do in the Army?" I said, "I don't really care. I just want to go to California." And talked to a Marine. And well, the Army's guys, I took these tests, the ASVAB, did well on it. Then I took a test to see how well I could do with a foreign language. And I passed that. So I go talk to Marines. I'm like, "Hey, the Army's going to make me a linguist and send me to Monterey, California, a beautiful place on the coast." And I said, "How about you guys?" He said, "We're going to make you a Marine. You're going to do whatever we want you to do." So I passed on the Marine Corps. I said, "I think I'll go do the Army." So off to Fort Dix, New Jersey in May of '92 I went through basic training, and then I arrived at like 3 o'clock in the morning in Monterey, California on a bus. And I remember getting off the bus, and a sergeant who was on guard that night goes, "Welcome to welcome to Bravo Company, you're going to learn Arabic. Well, that was interesting for me. This is 92, this is post-Desert Storm. I didn't know a lot about the Middle East. I remember when we had some run-ins with Libya back in around 86, I remember I had a bumper sticker on my wall. I don't know where I got it, but it was a Mickey Mouse with a thumbs down with Gaddafi's name on it, who was the president of Libya at the time. And it was kind of like, oh yeah, I had that bumper sticker on my wall. So people that speak Arabic is from North Africa, from Morocco, all the way over to Iraq, and then everywhere in between, North Africa and Middle East. So here I am, country boy from South Carolina, above average student, probably top 20% of my class, like barely top 20% of my class, learning Arabic, and it was really cool, except I sucked at Arabic. One of the reasons I wasn't very good was my English was not good. So my Arabic instructors are like, this is the present perfect. And I'm like, what's a present perfect? What's a past perfect? What's a gerund? I knew what a noun, a verb, and prepositional phrase, an adjective, and adverb were. That was it. And luckily in my class I had some NCOs, some non-commissioned officers, who had gone through German or had gone through Russian and were relanguaging into Arabic. And they kind of pulled me aside, helped me understand English grammar. And then I remember my grades, we had 3 semesters, and my grades in the first semester were all C's, and my grades in the second semester were all B's, and my grades in the third semester were all A's. And part of that was because I learned English as I learned Arabic, and it was really cool. After that, I go to follow-on training at Goodfellow Air Force Base. I was a cryptolinguist. So what we do is we listen to voice intercepts of telephone, radios, etc., and we try to figure out what the intent of the enemy is. So I go there for some technical training to learn about the military units in the Middle East, and then I was supposed to go to Fort Stewart, Georgia, for my first duty assignment, but I volunteered to go to airborne school to jump out of not so perfectly good airplanes. And so while I was at the airborne school at Fort Benning, Georgia, I'd gone home to visit my family in Hampton, and I drove through Hinesville, Georgia, on the way back, and I said, "Oh no, I don't want to be here." It was kind of the armpit of Georgia, I thought. And so, anyways, while I was in airborne school, a liaison from Fort Bragg came to us and said, "Hey, who wants to go to Bragg?" And I raised my hand as high as I could. And I got to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And there, I really, that's when the Army kind of began for me, so to speak. A lot of people have this perception that the Army's like what you see in movies, just a bunch of people marching around, getting yelled at or whatever, or combat every day or whatever. It's a lot of team building. And I was on a small 4-person team, 4-man team called LOVI, Low Level Voice Intercept. We carried these big heavy rugs with our intercept gear and commo gear. And we actually jumped out of airplane with them as well. And these are over 100-pound rugs, but we train a lot together. And the average day in the Army, what I really liked, it seemed like every day was a little bit different. One day, we have Motor Pool Monday, and that's where we go out and we do our pre-maintenance checks, services on our vehicles, our equipment, and then the next day may be a jump. And the day after that, we may be going to range. The day after that, we may be picking up trash, who knows. But it was a really good experience. It was fun to be part of a small team, and that's what the Army is. It's a team of teams, and it's built on trust. And trust is so important. Trust comes through living the values that the service values, and being proficient at your job, showing up on time, being in the right place, right time, right uniform with a good attitude. If you can do those things in life, believe me, I've got a few employees from Butler Country Club here. Just showing up right place, right time, in the right uniform with a good attitude goes a long way, right, fellas? Yeah. Okay. So anyways, going back to Bragg, got to jump out of some planes and stuff. Did a few years there, and I really liked the Army. You know, I was getting a paycheck. It was fun. I did get to finish my degree while I was in the military. A lot of that had to do with my Arabic and Farsi skills. I've gone back later in my career in 04, learned Persian Farsi. That's what they speak in Iran. But through all that, I was able to get a bachelor's degree. But I decided to stay in the Army just because I liked it. I re-enlisted to stay at Fort Bragg. I was fortunate to do that, and I got to do a semester of college at a local college there called Methodist College. That's now university. But then opportunity came to go to Saudi Arabia to support Army Central Command. So I volunteered for that, and that was really neat. I'd been to Germany. This is the first time kind of being outside the United States, outside of the first world, so to speak, Western Europe or America. And really, I gained a great appreciation of how fortunate we have it. And Saudi Arabia is very much a caste system. If you're a Saudi, you're up here. You know, if you're an expat, American, Canadian, Australian, Brit, you're next rung down. The poor Filipinos and Bangladeshis and Indians that work there, and I was doing security operations at Gate where I would interview people as they come on, and you kind of see some of the poverty and kind of how these people live. You know, I remember we ordered a pizza there. I was in Dhahran, which is on the east coast of Saudi, and I remember this guy brings some pizza and he like messed up our order, and it was, I forgot, I think we wrote a check or something, I forgot what it was, but he was like a Bangladeshi, and his boss was going to take that $25 out of his check, and he came to us begging for cash because that was like his month's income. And you kind of get paid over there based on where you're from. So you know, an engineer from the United States is going to make six figures, where that ditch digger is probably going to be making, you know, $100 a month or something, you know. So anyway, it helped me appreciate more of being an American. Following that, I wanted to get better at Arabic, so I went back to Monterey. You would hear that a lot, go back to Monterey and whatnot. And I went through the intermediate Arabic course for a year, and got pretty good at Arabic, really good at Arabic. And then to a Special Forces group in Fort Carson, Colorado. Well, when I called my branch manager, you call your branch manager who kind of handles your assignment and says, hey, what's next? And he says, well, 10th group's looking for Arabic linguists now, which was pretty interesting because 10th Special Forces Group's Arabic Operations Europe. And this was 1999. And so I said, yeah, I want to go to Colorado. Sounds like fun. And so I go to, I arrive at Fort Carson, kind of a funny story. I get there and I